The day I found out I was pregnant, my boyfriend held a small wedding with his first love. He explained, her last wish was to be my bride. What about me? What am I? I finally understood that 10 years of unwavering waiting and devotion couldn't compare to a single tear from his first love. The moment Gushitsi placed the wedding ring on the bride's finger, the room erupted in applause. In the warm atmosphere, he lifted her veil. I finally saw the woman he had once yearned for. Jiangyu, draped in a white wedding gown, was breathtakingly beautiful, making me feel ashamed of myself. The crowd chanted, "Kiss, kiss." Jiangyu, right on cue, stood on tiptoe, her lips puckered. He seemed to hesitate, but finally kissed her cheek. Just then he saw me standing under the tree. The wedding was held in a hospital, adding a touch of romance and warmth to this usually solemn place. And this man, the man who swore he would love me forever, the boyfriend who promised me a perfect wedding, held another woman's hand and vowed to stay with her for the rest of his life. And I just stood there frozen. My hands and feet were ice cold. A breeze blew past, a chill across my face. The wedding was paused because of me. Who is that? What is she doing here? She can't be here to steal the groom, can she? She's no match for the bride. All the guests stared at me. They frowned, their faces full of disapproval, as if I were the villain. As if I was the one preventing this perfect love. Jiangyu saw me too. She frowned slightly, as beautiful as an exquisite sculpture. Gushitsi panicked, let go of her hand, and made a move to come after me. Yuan and I. Jiangyu grabbed his arm, tears in her eyes, looking at me pitifully. ACI, this wedding can't go on without the groom. This always resolute and calm man actually hesitated. He looked at me, but his body leaned towards Jiangyu. What was I still hoping for? Waiting any longer would only be humiliating. He wouldn't choose me. I turned and left. Yuan. Gushitsi took a few steps towards me. Someone shouted hysterically behind him. Yeah. Chaos ensued. He still didn't come after me. I didn't sleep all night. Gushitsi didn't come back either. Our chat history stopped at my message. Shitsi, I have a surprise for you when you get back. Unexpectedly, he gave me a huge surprise first. The day I found out I was pregnant, my lover walked down the aisle with someone else. I really thought he was on a business trip. I really thought he was too busy to even reply to my messages. Turns out he was busy getting married. He made a joke of my waiting, my surprise, everything I did for him. The pregnancy test report was crumpled in my hand. There was no need for it anymore. When I met Gushitsi, he had just broken up with Jiangyu. He was suffering from both career and relationship setbacks. And my appearance was just so timely. I gave him comfort. I gave him encouragement. I accompanied him from rock bottom to the peak, for 7 whole years. 7 years. Later he said he wanted to marry me. I thought he felt gratitude, guilt towards me. But he said, I don't know when it started, but my eyes fell on you. And since then, I haven't been able to look away. At that moment I couldn't describe my feelings. He didn't know. Long ago, he had left a mark on my heart. It was me, always chasing his shadow. And on this day, my secret love finally blossomed and bore fruit. I finally saw the light at the end of the tunnel. I thought so. I really thought so. But Jiangyu's appearance shattered all my illusions. It was just self-deception. He never forgot her. When the last rays of sunset faded, I finally decided to leave. Just as I packed my suitcase, there was a noise outside the door. Gushitsi opened the door and came in looking tired. Yuan, that wedding doesn't count. I looked at him silently. Without a word. Jiangyu has ALS. She wanted to be a bride once. At that moment, was his pain because of my lack of understanding, or because of Jiangyu's impending demise? I couldn't tell. Probably the latter. He rarely grieved for me. When I went to see her today, she was wearing a wedding dress, and asked me to go through the rest of the ceremony with her. An indescribable sadness lingered between his brows. Yuan, I couldn't refuse, she's dying. Refuse? Did he ever really consider refusing? The smile on his face at the wedding couldn't be faked. He married the woman he had yearned for in his youth. He had once dreamed of marrying her. I asked, when did she come back? The day we went to choose rings. Actually, there were clues. He received a phone call that day. He was always calm and collected, especially since his career had been flourishing in recent years, and he rarely showed his emotions. But that day, he was suddenly distracted. There was a sorrow and anxiety in his eyes that I couldn't understand. He said there was a problem with his business, and he had to deal with it immediately. I believed him. Later, he went on a business trip for a few days. After he came back, he often spaced out. During that time, I always tried my best to make him happy. I really thought he had encountered a difficult problem. I wanted to share his worries. It turns out, he was worried about another woman. I asked him, "Were you with her during those days on your business trip?" He remained silent. He always disdained lying to me, but in the end, he broke his rule for Jiangyu. I suddenly realized that I didn't seem to recognize him anymore. But this face, the calm eyes, the thin lips were clearly his. I laughed self-deprecatingly. Gu Shixi, forget it. He didn't respond, standing in front of me motionless. His lips were tightly pursed. His Adam's apple moved, as if he had something to say. But he didn't say anything. I pushed my suitcase, preparing to bypass him and leave. He grabbed my wrist, his eyebrows furrowed, his voice hoarse. Yuan, don't go. I shook off his hand. I went to the hospital, had a checkup, and then scheduled the surgery. As soon as I got downstairs, I bumped into Jiangyu. She looked at me with a smile and introduced herself generously. "Hello, I'm Jiangyu." She's a ballerina. Her posture, her appearance, everything was perfect. When Gu Shixi's career failed, she left him and resolutely went abroad to study. Perhaps people are always fickle. What they can't have is always the best. So Gu Shixi has been obsessed with her for so many years. And someone like me, who rushed forward, naturally wouldn't be cherished by him. "I heard from ACI that you're his fiancé." She said this with her chin raised, the corners of her mouth slightly upturned. Full of pride. She was showing off to me. So what if I was his fiancé? He still went through a wedding ceremony with her. He still recited lifelong vows with her. In her eyes, I was a joke. ACI should have explained that wedding to you. I didn't want to talk to her anymore. My mouth was sour and bitter. He has nothing to do with me anymore. I wasn't so arrogant nor so despicable as to compete with a dying person. What she wanted she could have. I left quickly. Jiangyu seemed to have more to say, but she fell to the ground as she chased after me. That's when Gu Shixi appeared. He frowned slightly at the sight. He hurried forward and helped Jiangyu up. His movements were gentle, as if he was afraid that a little more force would break her. But when his eyes met mine, there was a hint of sharpness and blame. Yuan, Jiangyu is sick. Yes, she's sick. So he could spend the whole night with her without any explanation, leaving me alone at home overthinking. Until the next day, he only said a few indifferent words, begging me not to leave. I was never his priority. I didn't do anything. Your wife fell out of nowhere. I emphasized the word wife, my tone mocking. His brows furrowed even more. Probably because of my attitude. I was always considerate to him. Over the years, I rarely showed my sharpness in front of him. Truly pathetic. Jiangyu apologized, but the smile in her eyes deepened. I fell on my own. It has nothing to do with Yuan. ACI, sometimes I can't control my movements. At this moment, I suddenly understood that Jiangyu, with her proud nature, disdained using any petty tricks. She just had to hook her finger, show her vulnerability, and Gu Shixi would eagerly rush to her side. He still had feelings for her, and couldn't bear to blame her for abandoning him. In the face of life and death, what did past grievances matter? Hearing her words, Gu Shixi froze, looking at me with words on the tip of his tongue. Jiangyu took the orange from his hand and said casually, "Okay, you must have a lot to talk about. I'll go back to my ward. Take your time." Only then did I notice the peeled orange in Gu Shixi's hand. Here's a funny thing. I love oranges. But Gu Shixi doesn't. When we first got together, he took me to a dinner with his friends. He introduced me to them, which made me feel very secure. At that time, I didn't fully understand his likes and dislikes. To get closer to him, I offered him a piece of orange cake. He froze, his lips tightly closed. There was a moment of silence. His friends all looked at me. My palms started to sweat. I subconsciously wondered, did I do something wrong? Did I upset him? Someone tried to smooth things over. Brother CI hates anything orange-flavored the most. Sister-in-law, you don't even know this. You have to drink a forfeit. The atmosphere quickly became lively again. But in the end I still felt lost. It wasn't until one time when he was drunk that Gu Shixi finally told me the reason. Actually, when he was a child he didn't mind citrus fruits. His mother wasn't healthy, and always had a poor appetite. But she particularly liked oranges. so the house always had them. It was a cold winter. She peeled an orange for him one last time, kissed his cheek and said, "Wait for mommy at home. When you finish this plate of oranges, mommy will be back." That day he waited until the last rays of sunset faded. He waited until the snow fell heavier and heavier, past his ankles. Finally, he only waited for one sentence. "Gu Shitsi, your mother jumped into the river." His mother died that winter. When he grew older, he realized that his mother didn't really like oranges that much. It was just that she was sick, and oranges were cheap and vibrant in color. His mother's oranges were just a helpless choice under the double pressure of life and illness. His voice choked. Later, I never ate tangerines or oranges again. That night, his tears were hot. They rolled across my skin, making me cry too. I knew that oranges would remind him of his mother. It would remind him of his miserable and helpless childhood. So later, I basically stopped eating them too. Even the citrus-scented perfume was hidden in the deepest part of my closet, never to be taken out again. Until this moment, seeing the orange in his hand, I finally understood. Actually, Gu Shitsi had become strong enough that he didn't need to avoid these things anymore. It's just that I couldn't be his exception. It's just that he never cared about my efforts. It's just that he didn't know what I liked. But he knew that Jiangyu liked oranges. Any sad memories, any embarrassing past could make way for her preferences. Gu Shitsi looked at her with concern. "Do you need me to call a nurse?" His care for her was always blatant. Jiangyu shrugged, smiling brightly. "ACI, I can walk back myself. You guys talk." Gu Shitsi then looked at me. "Yuan, where did you move to you?" A loud noise came. Jiangyu had just walked a short distance when she fell again. Before Gu Shitsi could finish his sentence, he turned and rushed towards her. I stood where I was, watching his anxious face, watching him frown at the scratch on her arm. He said, "I told you not to come by yourself. Does it hurt?" His tone wasn't harsh, it was like a gentle reproach, like flirting. He asked, "Can you still walk?" Jiangyu shook her head. He picked her up horizontally. They walked away in the opposite direction. Jiangyu wrapped her arms around his neck, turned her head to look at me, and smiled brightly. Her triumphant expression said 3 words. "I won." She used the same trick again. Stupid but effective. My stomach churned. I turned and ran to the bathroom at the end of the corridor, vomiting violently. It was a long time before Gu Shitsi sent a message. Yuan, why are you at the hospital? Are you feeling unwell?" Wasn't this message a little too late? He also forgot to ask yesterday why I appeared at his wedding. I shook my head and laughed self-deprecatingly. Then, I blocked all his contact information. Gu Shitsi still found out about my pregnancy. Zhang Man looked apologetic. Yuan, I'm so sorry. I'll definitely teach Li Chao a lesson when I get back." Li Chao on the other end of the phone said. Yuan, you two have been together for so long. Give brother Ci a chance, give the child a chance. Zhang Man cursed, snatched the phone from my hand, and yelled at Li Chao. What Gu Shitsi did is inhumane. Yuan is just too nice. If it were me, I'd break his arms and let him and Jiangyu fly together, 2 sweet cripples. It's funny. Zhang Man is my best friend, and Li Chao is Gu Shitsi's childhood friend. Their marriage was even brought about by us. It only took 2 years for them to tie the knot. They got their marriage license a few days ago, and just needed a wedding. And Gu Shitsi and I, after 7 years of being together, ended up like this. Gu Shitsi still came. He ran here, sweating profusely, his face anxious. Seeing that I was still outside the operating room, his brows suddenly relaxed. He hugged me tightly, as if afraid that I would disappear if he let go. Yuan, I was wrong. Don't be impulsive, can we talk? There was a faint smell of smoke on him. Gu Shitsi's father died of lung cancer, so he rarely smoked. He only lit one up when he was really upset. These days he was running around, seeking medical treatment for Jiangyu. People even asked me about it. They subtly asked me if I was okay. These people really thought I could make Gu Shitsi this anxious. How ridiculous. Stronger than the smell of smoke was the scent of jasmine. A few days ago at the hospital, I smelled this familiar scent on Jiangyu. I suddenly remembered. It was our 2nd year together. Also the 5th year we knew each other. His father passed away, and immediately after, the company had some problems with its capital chain. During that time, Gu Shitsi couldn't sleep at night. Worried about his health, I asked the doctor to prescribe some Chinese medicine soup to help him sleep. Then I specifically took half a day off to decoct the medicine for him. That day, I watched over the pot of soup. I waited until very late, but only received one sentence. Yuan, I want to be alone and clear my head. Don't worry about me. He didn't come back for a few days. And when he did, he had this jasmine scent on him. It turned out that he went to find Jiangyu, to find his only spiritual support. Even more ridiculously, when I asked him about the scent on him, he handed me a bottle of perfume. A gift for you. The salesperson let me try it, and I thought you'd like it. He went out to clear his head, and still remembered to bring me a gift. I thought he must love me very much. The previous unhappiness vanished. During the following period, our relationship rapidly progressed. He always liked to cling to me, burying his face in my neck. Unfortunately, I didn't understand his intentions until today. He didn't like me that much. He just liked the jasmine scent on me. Without knowing it, I became a substitute for Jiangyu. A poor substitute. Apart from that scent, we had nothing in common. I struggled out of his arms and slapped him hard. He stood there stunned, covering his face, looking lost. Zhang Man looked at me. Yuan, what are you? I covered my mouth and ran to the bathroom. I vomited violently, as if I wanted to throw up my heart, liver, and lungs. Zhang Man handed me a bottle of water, constantly patting my back to help me catch my breath. Why are you vomiting so badly? This is terrible. Gu Shixi stood at the doorway, with a pained expression on his face. Several red fingerprints were particularly prominent on his pale cheeks. I glared at him hatefully. Do you know how disgusting you are? That perfume, you picked it on purpose, right? The same scent as Jiangyu's. He knew what I was talking about. In an instant his face turned pale. What was he thinking when he did these things? Didn't he find it disgusting himself? Yuan, let me explain. Back then, I didn't understand. I thought it was that scent that calmed me. Later, I realized it was you who calmed me. Yuan, I really want to marry you. I sneered. Fine, choose one. Either Jiangyu gets out of our lives, or we draw a clear line, and from now on, you never appear in front of me again. Gu Shixi's expression froze. He was probably really thinking about it. Zhang Man yelled. What are you hesitating about? Of course, you choose Yuan. You've known each other for 7 years, been together for 4. Have you forgotten all of this? But Gu Shixi didn't think so. He murmured. But she's dying, Yuan, she's dying. She's a ballerina, but she has ALS. Do you know that kind of despair? His words seemed to mock me. Jiangyu only lost a life, but I lost love. How ridiculous. Gu Shixi, but you're my boyfriend. Do you pity her so much that you'll marry her? Pity her so much that you ignore my feelings and abandon me again and again to rush to her? Are you pitying her? Or are you still hung up on her? Can't you tell the difference yourself? Countless times, he used terminal illness as an excuse to cover up his lingering feelings. So stubborn. Gu Shixi didn't speak again. He just clenched his fists until his knuckles turned white, but still didn't give an answer. At this moment, a ringing phone broke the deathly silence. Gu Shixi took out his phone. The other end was chaotic. Someone shouted. Come quickly. Jiangyu is attempting suicide. She doesn't want to live anymore. He immediately panicked. And at this time, the nurse called me into the operating room. He had already made his choice. I smiled and said, Go. Don't let her actually die, or you'll hate me forever. Being hated by this kind of person would be bad karma. Gu Shixi looked at me with pleading eyes. Yuan, promise me, wait until I come back to make a decision, okay? I'm the child's father. Let's discuss it together. I tugged at the corner of my lips. My nails dug hard into my palm. These 7 years might as well have been fed to the dogs. Another phone call. The other end was urging him. Zhang Man said fiercely. Gu Shixi, do you have a conscience? His expression was visibly anxious. He was probably really scared, afraid that Jiangyu would jump from a tall building. Yuan, wait for me to come back. Wait for me to come back and we'll make a decision. I didn't speak, and he turned to Zhang Man. Zhang Man, I beg you, watch her. Don't let her go in. Zhang Man cursed. Watch her yourself. Are you even a man? I told him to wait. Then I unscrewed the cap and poured the remaining half bottle of water, used for rinsing my mouth, all over his head. Gu Shixi, we're over. Don't come looking for me. Water droplets snaked down his face, splattering on the ground. He looked so stupid. Water splashed into his eyes, making them red. He stared at me blankly and said hoarsely, "I'm sorry." Watching his fleeing figure, I felt like a failure. Zhang Man stomped her foot in anger. "That dog of a man!" After cursing, she asked me, Yuan, are you okay?" "I'm fine. I never thought he would choose me. Even if he had chosen me, even if Jiang Yu had completely disappeared from our lives, we could never go back to the way we were. A broken mirror can't be put back together." Before entering the operating room, I sent him a few messages. "If you want, plenty of people will have children for you. But in this world, there is only one Jiang Yu. I want him to remember that this child was killed by him and Jiang Yu. I want him to remember that he once rested his head on my stomach and asked me, Yuan, do you want a boy or a girl?" He was the one who wanted the child, and he was the one who gave up the child. This is what it means to truly break someone's heart. The surgery ended quickly. When I woke up, Li Chao was there. I suddenly remembered something. "Li Chao, there are 2 rings in my bag. Please return them to Gu Shixi." Anyway, the wedding rings were chosen casually. Gu Shixi was thinking about Jiang Yu at the time, and didn't put any thought into it. "I don't care about them." Li Chao nodded and left. Zhang Man sat beside me. Yuan, Gu Shixi isn't worth it." I knew she deliberately revealed my pregnancy to Li Chao. Letting go of those 7 years, how easy could it be? She thought the misunderstanding between Gu Shixi and me was solely because of Jiang Yu. But she didn't know they had a wedding ceremony. She didn't know how many times Gu Shixi abandoned me for Jiang Yu. But now she knew everything. Li Chao sent her a video. Zhang Man opened it directly, without avoiding me. In the video, Gu Shixi held Jiang Yu in his arms. They embraced and sobbed. She said, "I don't want to stay in the hospital anymore. It's so stuffy. I don't like it here." Gu Shixi said okay, anything for her. She said, "I want to see the world, I want to dance ballet again, I want." She couldn't stop crying. Gu Shixi repeatedly agreed. He closed his eyes, tears streaming down his face. Look how affectionate. Fate is truly cruel to these 2 star-crossed lovers. It made me sick to my stomach. Zhang Man showed me this video to force me to harden my heart. She's always been clear-headed. After being discharged from the hospital, Li Chao and Zhang Man drove me home. Just as we got into the car, Gu Shixi appeared. He held the ring box I returned, his eyes vacant. Yuan, did you really abort our child?" Zhang Man frowned. "Don't act like the victim. Isn't this all your fault?" I asked softly. "Where's Jiang Yu? Is she asleep? Otherwise, why would he be here?" Gu Shixi didn't answer, which was a tacit agreement. I laughed. "If you're so devoted, then die with her. Don't appear in front of me again." Because of these words, a crack appeared in his vacant expression. Pain, sadness, guilt. All leaked out from this crack. His eyes were bloodshot. I didn't speak anymore. My lower abdomen hurt badly. Even breathing was difficult. Zhang Man was furious and cursed. "Empty your heart, so that the next person who lives there will be comfortable. Why don't you understand such a simple truth? Gu Shixi, Yuan waited for you for 7 years. What about that Jiang Yu? She abandoned you, and you still chased after her. Are you a masochist? A true heart fed to the dogs, how disgusting." Gu Shixi didn't retort. Zhang Man tried to close the car door, but he reached out and grabbed it. Yuan, she will leave our lives." Zhang Man rolled her eyes and sneered. "Weren't you just saying you would travel the world with her? So you're deceiving one after another, Gu Shixi. You want both, you're quite greedy. I'm closing the door now. If your hand gets broken, it won't be easy to take care of your old flame." Gu Shixi remained unmoved. No matter how Zhang Man cursed, he refused to let go. Li Chao got out of the driver's seat and tried to persuade him. "Just go. What you did is despicable. Don't force me to punch you." Gu Shixi just stared at me. Yuan, those words were just to comfort her. "I will explain it to her." He opened the ring box and held one of the rings in front of me. "We can go back to how we were. We can get married. And we can have children again." Li Chao shook his head repeatedly, then pried his fingers open one by one. Gu Shixi looked at me, his lips trembling. His Adam's apple bobbed, but he didn't make a sound. The pleading in his eyes was overflowing. The car started. I looked in the rearview mirror. Gu Shixi stood there, staring at my departing car for a long time. When he decided to abandon me, he knew the consequences. He was just putting on a sorrowful act to show his deep affection. Zhang Man followed my gaze and scoffed. pretending to be such a lovesick fool. Later, I spent my days recuperating in a rented apartment. Zhang Man visited me often. She said, Gu Shixi keeps pestering Li Chao for your address. It's driving me crazy. I smiled and continued eating my orange pudding. One day, I received a call from Jiang Yu. She asked me out for a chat. I readily agreed. When I arrived at the cafe, she was already seated. Setting aside our past grievances, Jiang Yu was the type of girl who could dazzle. She was truly beautiful. She said, all these years, ACI has been well taken care of by you. I twirled my hair and laughed. Do you know what you look like right now? Like a smug little thief, clearly aware that you've stolen someone else's fruit, not ashamed, but rather complacent. Quite shameless. Some things just had to be said. Jiang Yu stirred her coffee, her face devoid of any annoyance. Love isn't like gardening. I'm dying, so I'm discarding everything and trying to reclaim what I lost. If anyone is to blame, it's you. I gave you 7 years, and you still couldn't capture his heart. She said this with her chin raised, a bright smile on her face. The posture of a victor. It seemed she truly believed her death would permanently seal Gu Shixi's love for her. She would become the indelible mark on his heart. Irreplaceable. I laughed at her naivety. You're dying. What can you possibly hold on to? If you were truly capable, you should make Gu Shixi marry no one but you, and follow you to the underworld. Jiang Yu, I know the living can't compete with the dead, but after you die, can you guarantee he won't encounter another moonlight like you? She knew better than I did how desirable Gu Shixi was. Exceptionally handsome, wealthy, he easily attracted a constant stream of admirers. Jiang Yu's smile froze. I continued to fan the flames. Let's guess, after you die, will he beg me to come back? She hadn't asked me out just to show off her victory. She was afraid. She must have known that Gu Shixi had been searching for me, calling me from different numbers. She wanted to test my attitude, to disgust me, to make me give up completely. Unfortunately, I had long since stopped caring about that piece of trash. I curled my lip. If I don't go back, do you think he'll dwell on someone who's been dead for years, or prefer me constantly before his eyes, yet unattainable? I took a sip of coffee. It was bitter. Jiang Yu, you know better than I do how pathetic Gu Shixi is. Towards you, is it unrequited love, or deep-rooted affection? She pursed her lips, saying nothing. It seemed she wasn't sure herself. Die beautifully in his arms. Maybe he'll remember you for a few more years. Leaving this piece of advice, I got up and left. She was like a withering rose, in the face of death, frantically absorbing love from others. To prove her existence, to demonstrate her significance. Quite pathetic. Let them continue to compose their tragic, earth-shattering love story that transcends life and death. It had nothing to do with me anymore. After a period of recuperation, I accepted a headhunter's offer and switched to a new company. This city isn't big, but it isn't small either. Big enough to make it hard to see someone again after you've said goodbye. It's silly really, but when Gu Shixi and I first got together, I resigned from my job to help him. I didn't return to my own field until his business was stable. Leaving aside the emotional aspect, it was valuable work experience. But it did disrupt my career plans. Looking back now, I really feel like I wasted my sincerity. A few months passed by uneventfully. One day, Zhang Man came to my door with a wedding invitation. For various reasons, their wedding had been postponed repeatedly. Finally this winter it was happening. Zhang Man asked me, Gu Shixi will be there too, do you mind? If you do, I'll have Li Chao shoo him away. Li Chao and Gu Shixi had known each other for a long time. They had promised to be each other's best man. Of course, their wedding shouldn't be affected because of me. I shook my head. Don't worry about me. It's your wedding, do whatever makes you happy. The wedding day arrived quickly. Gu Shixi, as the best man, followed behind Li Chao to pick up Zhang Man. He looked dapper in his suit, much like the first time we met. He probably didn't remember, but I did. It was autumn. I failed to get into graduate school, and immediately after, my autumn recruitment prospects also vanished. I was sitting in the pavilion on the back hill of the school, suddenly missing my mother terribly. If she were still here, she would definitely make me braised pork. After I was full, she'd tell me to keep trying. But she was gone. I stood on the top of the hill. For a moment, I really wanted to jump. That's when I saw Gu Shixi. He had just successfully started his business, dressed in a suit full of vigor. He stood beside me and said as if casually, "This is the place with the best view in the school. You can see a rainbow." I followed his gaze and really saw a rainbow. It was breathtakingly beautiful. I suddenly felt relieved. The heavy stone pressing down on me seemed lighter. It was probably just a casual remark, but I remembered it for many years. I didn't see him again until 3 years later. Then 7 years of entanglement. Unlike that year, he now looked exhausted. He saw me too. The atmosphere was lively, but he just stood there, staring at me motionlessly. His eyes were complex. I turned sideways to help Zhang Man adjust her dress, using it as an excuse to avoid his gaze. Li Chao carried Zhang Man downstairs. Zhang Man's family lived in an old building with no elevator, so they had to take the stairs. There were a lot of people. A child accidentally pushed me. I rarely wore high heels, and immediately lost my balance. Just as I was about to fall, Gu Shixi caught me. The moment I came into contact with him, I smelled the familiar scent of smoke and jasmine. A familiar wave of nausea surged up. After regaining my balance, I pushed him away with all my might. "Don't touch me." He took a few steps back, leaning against the railing to steady himself. He lowered his eyes, speechless, looking hurt. Yuan, be careful." His voice was as gentle as ever. His tone, as if we still had something between us. I ignored him and turned to go downstairs. After arriving at the hotel, I discovered Jiang Yu was also there. She sat in a wheelchair, her face bare of makeup, her lips pale. Still that same delicate and pitiful appearance. She softly called, "Asi." Gu Shixi frowned imperceptibly, but still rushed towards her. Zhang Man looked at Li Chao beside her. Li Chao quickly denied any involvement. "I didn't invite her." He glanced at me. "Maybe she's afraid Ci Go will be snatched away. After all, a thief is most afraid of meeting a colleague." I raised an eyebrow. "I'm not a colleague." Li Chao shrugged. "People with dirty minds think everyone else is dirty." Zhang Man sneered. "Fine, since she's shameless, I won't be polite either." Soon the auspicious time arrived. The background music of Love Story began to play. Dressed in a white wedding gown, Zhang Man slowly walked towards Li Chao. Standing below the stage, I couldn't help but tear up a little. At some point, Gu Shixi came to my side. He handed me a tissue. I didn't take it. It was then that I noticed the wedding ring on his ring finger. How pretentious. He didn't put any thought into choosing it. But after separating, he refuses to take it off, hypocritically pretending to be deeply affectionate. Jiang Yu wheeled herself over. "Asi, we didn't even exchange rings that day." Gu Shixi didn't respond, turning his head to look at me, seemingly wanting to see some sadness and unwillingness on my face. But he was destined to be disappointed. I stared at the newlyweds embracing on stage, my face full of smiles, urging them to kiss. Gu Shixi lowered his eyes. "We should have been the ones on stage, shouldn't we?" His voice was very soft, swallowed by the crowd in an instant. But I heard it. Jiang Yu also heard it. Her lips trembled intensely. She knew clearly that the "we" in Gu Shixi's words referred to me and him. Zhang Man had suggested before that the four of us hold a wedding together. At that time, everyone's relationship was good, so naturally, the proposal was unanimously approved. I didn't expect Gu Shixi to still remember such a thing. Having one's cake and eating it too. Truly disgusting. I took a few steps back. At this moment, a bouquet landed squarely on Jiang Yu's head. Zhang Man took the microphone from the MC. "Oh dear, how did it hit your head? I remember you've been married before, haven't you? Saying you have a terminal illness, and only want to get married once in this life. So you stole someone else's fiancé. Didn't even get the certificate, but wore a wedding dress, and forced him to hold a wedding with you. Impressive. Truly impressive. People love gossip." Hearing this, the guests who had been burying their heads in food all looked up, searching for the protagonists of the story. I shifted to the side again. Jiang Yu held the bouquet, her face pale. Whispers arose from all directions. Some even took out their phones to record videos. "Oh my, this person is so beautiful, how can she be a mistress? I think she's just a vixen. A terminal illness isn't an excuse to steal someone else's fiancé. That poor girl almost married, and she pulls this stunt, truly shameless. That man isn't a good thing either. A perfect match for that vixen." Li Chao coughed a few times pretendingly. Zhang Man winked at me and returned the microphone to the MC. She was venting my anger for me. When Jiang Yu held her wedding, I had also been maliciously speculated about by her relatives and friends. Jiang Yu looked a little lost. She subconsciously looked up at Gu Shizhi, seeking help. But he just looked at me, wanting to speak but stopping himself. "I." Gu Shizhi didn't respond. Jiang Yu's eyes quickly reddened. Words can be daunting. She hurriedly lowered her head and activated her automatic wheelchair to leave. Unexpectedly, Gu Shizhi didn't chase after her. "Yuan, I didn't register the marriage with her. I really regret it. There are no filial children at the bedside of a long-term illness, let alone a woman who had abandoned him." Perhaps the past unwillingness and unrequited love had long been worn away. His white moonlight, perhaps soon, would become leftover rice at the bottom of the bowl. Zhang Man said with a grin. "Aren't you going to chase after her? What if she tries to commit suicide again? What if she really dies? I don't want to be charged with murder." Gu Shizhi took a deep look at me and left. Zhang Man spat. "That Jiang Yu has no sense of propriety. I feel disgusted just seeing her." Li Chao put his arm around her, gently stroking her belly. "Honey, calm down, don't startle the baby." Zhang Man snorted coldly. "You should also spend less time with muddle-headed people like Gu Shizhi in the future." Yes, I'll listen to you." Later, I heard Jiang Yu disappeared. Zhang Man, eating cherries washed by Li Chao, sneered. "Still playing games. Who does she think she is? The more drama she creates, the more annoyed Gu Shizhi will be." I smiled. "She's not creating drama, she's afraid. I heard that once ALS reaches the middle stage, daily life becomes almost impossible. She's afraid Gu Shizhi will see her at her worst. She wants to remain beautiful, to die beautifully in Gu Shizhi's memories. Rather than tormenting each other, she prefers Gu Shizhi's guilt. That way, he'll remember her longer." It seems she took to heart what I said at the cafe that day. Later, Zhang Man told me Gu Shizhi found Jiang Yu. Because of her emotional distress and passive approach to treatment, her illness progressed rapidly. Gu Shizhi was consumed by guilt and actually planned to take her on a trip around the world. But his company couldn't just stop operating. Not long after, the company's CEO was replaced. Winter turned to spring, spring to autumn. Jiang Yu died that winter. Zhang Man sighed. Actually, Jiang Yu's story is quite tragic. Such a beauty taken too soon. If she hadn't pulled all those stunts, I would have pitied her. I thought for a moment, me too. Saying that wasn't out of some misplaced sense of piety, but rather a sense of shared female empathy. Not long after, due to a wrong decision, Gu Shizhi's company suffered a heavy blow. He's currently in a complete mess. When Zhang Man told me this news, she grinned. That crappy company should have gone under ages ago. Without my Yuan, how could it have ever flourished? I nodded repeatedly as I reviewed a project proposal on my computer. Good thing I left early. Later, Gu Shizhi still sought me out. Actually, he had found out my address long ago. A while ago, I woke up one midnight and went to the bathroom in the dark. For some reason, I glanced downstairs. I happened to see him standing downstairs at my place. The dim yellow light fell on him. His figure looked lonely. He didn't know how long he had been standing there. A circle of cigarette butts lay at his feet. I immediately pulled the curtains closed and didn't look again. This time, he had lost a lot of weight. He looked like he had dressed up carefully, but he still couldn't hide his exhaustion. He still wore that wedding ring on his ring finger. Yuan, can I come in and sit down?" I crossed my arms, blocking the doorway. "If you have something to say it here." Seeing my firm attitude, he didn't force the issue. Yuan, I miss you very much." He sighed, his voice sounding rather weary. "When Jiang Yu passed away, I wasn't as sad as I imagined. But every day without you, I feel incredibly terrible. Look, Jiang Yu, now do you still think you won?" Gu Shizhi took out the woman's ring again. Yuan, I can't live without you. Without you, how can I go on?" He's so naive. Back then at the hospital, I didn't accept this ring. Now, it's even more impossible. My words were barbed. "So now that one white moonlight is dead, you finally remember this grain of plain rice?" He came to beg me, perhaps with some sincerity, but more likely, he saw my value and wanted me to help him rise again. He brought this upon himself. He can't blame anyone. Gu Shizhi frowned. Yuan, don't be like this. This isn't like you." I shrugged. "I speak to people as people, and to dogs as dogs. Zhang Man and I were always the same kind of people. But because I loved him, I sheathed my claws. but he didn't cherish it. His tone was certain. Our 7 years, you couldn't have moved on so quickly. I smiled and shook my head. I've always been able to let go. He was still deceiving himself. Gu Shitsi, do you think everyone is as fickle as you? He pursed his lips and said, Jiang Yu and I weren't legally married. I said sarcastically, what do you mean by telling me this? Do you want me to praise you? Oh, you held your ground, good job? You're trying to exaggerate your deep love for me by downplaying your love for her. Gu Shitsi, this makes me feel sick. This was a wedding held in a hospital. I'm afraid if I agreed to him next time, he would say the same thing to another woman. I only regret that we were entangled for so many years. It wasn't until Jiang Yu returned to the country that I saw his true colors. I pretended to close the door. Excuse me, I have to put on my makeup. My boyfriend is waiting for me. Gu Shitsi was stunned. I don't believe it. Don't believe it? I raised an eyebrow, finding him ridiculous. Look downstairs, the one driving the Lamborghini, that's my boyfriend. Taller, more handsome, and younger than you. He actually walked to the end of the hallway and looked out the window. Then his face turned ashen. With a bang, I closed the door. On the phone, the new intern's voice was bright. Sister, when will I finally become a full-time employee?